crafty friends, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts. Today we have a long video sharing how I created these 12 cards for my Halloween party. I'm not going to show you all 12, I'm just going to show you one of each of the 3 designs that I went with. So we're going to start with the blue house. I'm going to take the blue card bases and the connector pieces and do some ink blending. I have Stormy Sky and Chipped Sapphire. For my first card here, I ended up using both inks, but by the time I finished this card, I realized that I didn't really need the Stormy Sky because the paper was already blue. So for my other 3 cards, I just used the Chipped Sapphire. So I went around the entire base with the Stormy Sky, and now I have my Chipped Sapphire that I'm going to bring in not quite as far out. This is just going to add some more dimension to my card panel. You definitely do not need to do any ink blending here. I just kind of went all out. You guys know this. But you can definitely leave your panel blue and you can just do your stenciling on top with the inks. I like that added dimension on the edges. And I am creating my own stencil. This is the Slimline Wood Grain Background by Scrappy Tales Crafts. I cut it from heavyweight 110-pound white cardstock. And I'm just running my blender tool through all those openings to create a faux stencil. Now it's not completely sturdy, there's a lot of cutouts, so it's not going to be a perfect blend through, but the texture is there and I really liked the effect that it created. So I did that for the front and the back panel. This time I blended through the stencil first, and then I went around the edges with my Stormy Sky and my Chipped Sapphire. The stencil was able to hold up for all 4 cards, although the last one was a bit rough, but it didn't really matter because it was just a background texture, and that's why I didn't really care to use a real stencil. I mainly just wanted something in the background. But definitely use stencils in your stash if you want a more perfect outcome. I went around the edges with the same inks for the connector pieces, but I didn't bother to go over them with the wood grain because they're going to be folded, so I didn't think you would notice the texture on that. And in fact, you probably don't even need to go over them with the inks at all. So here I have my door for this card, and I'm going to go around the edges with my, I believe this is the Wilderness color, Rustic Wilderness, and I like this color, but I wanted something brighter, so for my other 3 cards I used Lucky Clover, and that's what I'm going to link to because I thought that blend looked nicer. I have 2 green doors just so that it will be a little more stable. These doors are going to open to reveal a sentiment. They're going to be handled a lot, so I wanted them to not rip or anything, so I'm going to glue 2 doors back to back. I am using lighter weight cardstock for this, which I oftentimes like to do when it comes to paper piecing because I can double cut my die cuts in my Gemini machine typically. So all of these little details you see on the door were definitely double cut. And I'm going around each one of those with a finger dauber with the same Rustic Wilderness ink. This finger dauber concentrates more ink on the edges. I wanted these to be darker so that they would look like a real door. I have the chimneys here. I'm going to go over them with just the Chipped Sapphire and that stencil. I only did that with this card. For the others, I just did the little bit of ink blending at the bottom, and I didn't bother with that stencil, just because they're so small. Then I have my roofs, and I wanted them to have dimension too, so I have my Black Soot Distress Oxide, and I'm going around the bottom edge of each roof. Like I said, all the ink blending is completely optional. I think that it does add a lot of dimension and I enjoy ink blending, so I went ahead and did it, but you're going to see by the time I was down to my last card design, I am not doing as much ink blending as I'm doing here. This one was definitely the most involved when it comes to ink blending. You can see that I added black soot to the doorstep as well as the top of the chimneys. And then I also added a little bit of carved pumpkin for my pumpkins. So here I'm kind of laying out how I want this house to look, mainly because I'm going to cut the windows out. I needed to know the exact placement of everything so that I can line up the coordinating base layer that will cut out the window shape and the door directly from the card panel. I'm doing this because for the door, I want that to be open to reveal a sentiment inside, and for the windows, I want those to be cut so you can see my lights inside the house. Here I'm lining up the second window, and you can see that I have my white die cut layered behind. That's just to add some more stability. You really don't need those white layers unless you want to add them, because by the time you add all of your house pieces, it does end up adding quite a bit of weight. And there is, of course, also the backer that has 2 layers attached to it to reveal the color that's on the inside of the windows, and then the back to reveal the Halloween party information. So here I have my Christmas lights, but I'm going to add orange lights to this string to make them more Halloween themed, and I think they turned out really cute. I'm going to add them to each of my roofs, one for the front and one for the back. By the way, all of those cutouts that I made to the card base come in that Slimline Neighborhood House add-on. And they are sized so that you can glue the window frames right on top. I'm going to glue my blue base to my white one, and then I can go ahead and start gluing everything together. And even though I only made 3 light up cards, I still added those cutouts through the base for my other 9 cards because I wanted another color to be shown through the windows. It also adds that dimension, and I always, for all 12 cards, had a sentiment inside the door. So here I paper pieced my door frame. I added some black to the edge just to define it more, and then here I'm going to go ahead and add my second green door behind, making sure that my ink blending is facing upwards so that when the door does swing open, you will see the ink blending inside. I'm going to trim off the little bit of excess I had. And then I have to glue on the details for my door. This is a Dutch door, so you can open it from both sides. For the other 2 cards, I will use the door that comes in the Christmas house add-on, and then the other one I use the fairy house add-on door. So I'm adding 2 white layers of die cuts behind my green blended ones to add dimension to these. Typically, these pieces would be recessed inside the door, but obviously I can't do that, so I'm going to pop them up. This added a lot of nice dimension. I'm glad that I took the extra effort to do that. And because they're blended slightly darker, they do pop out more against the lighter green door. So this video is sped up 4 times the speed that I'm currently working at. Usually I do my videos at 3 speed, but this video ended up being so long, and in total all 12 cards took about 3 full days in the craft room, so probably like 24 to 30 hours. So they definitely were a labor of love. Definitely my most involved pop-up card, mass-produced card. But I absolutely love the outcome, and I love that there were 3 designs that I went with. I added the doorknobs to my door. Then I just glued the door frame to the outer edge of my cutout. Make sure you don't glue the actual swinging doors because it's just going to glue onto your glass mat. I added my gray doorstep to the bottom of the card as well as a black fence. I think that the gray helped it stand out more. I'm going to add my white die cuts behind my pumpkin. So behind the pumpkin's detailed face, I added 1 layer of white, and then I added the orange shadow layer, and then I added another white layer behind that. So he's quite dimensional. I will have one for the front and back of my card. I do need a press here button because this card is going to light up. So I use the push here 3x4 stamp by Lawn Fawn, my probably most used stamp by Lawn Fawn. I'm stamping a couple press heres so that I can use them for my other two cards, and if any mess up, I have some extras. I'm using some white detail embossing powder here. And then I will just heat set that and hand cut these little words. So I'm going to glue this one onto the top of my pumpkin. I want to add that battery to the right side of all of my cards, and it will be well hidden. So I'm going to add my roof to the top of this card, and then I can go ahead and add my windows. I did layer one white die cut behind my black ones for added dimension, and you wouldn't think that one die cut does much, but I'm using very thin colored cardstock. I think it's 65 pound. I buy it at Michael's, so it's just not sturdy. So if anyone has suggestions on heavyweight colored cardstock, please leave them down below. I think that will make my life a little bit easier. But even if I had heavier weight, I probably still would add a white die cut because it does add so much nice dimension. I added vellum behind my house so that it will be easier to glue my windows. You can glue the outer frame to the open part of the window, but I wanted to make sure that the inner parts were also glued. So I added the vellum behind so that way I can completely adhere these down. I added the half circle window to the top there. And then vellum is also great, in my opinion, with Pear Blossom Press Lights because it hides that stark light bulb and it radiates the light, if that makes sense. It bounces back so the light expands more versus concentrates on one specific area. So I do love to use vellum when it comes to Amanda's lights, and I will link her lights in my description. They are pretty awesome. So the only thing that I didn't ink blend were these witch boots because they're so tiny. So instead I used a Copic marker to add a little bit of shading to them at the bottom. And I'm going to add the white die cut behind them. You can see I already paper pieced my broomstick. And I wanted to initially add both boots to the bottom, but I felt like it was too much happening at the bottom. So I'm only going to end up using one boot, and then the other boot I will use on the back side. So out of the three designs, this one's probably the most friendliest. I typically gravitate towards the more spooky side of Halloween, but my mother-in-law likes cutesy Halloween stuff, so I wanted to make sure I had one design that was a little more friendly. So I added some smoke to my chimney, and I added the gray detail piece at the top. I'm going to glue my chimneys back to back to hide the smoke. So I didn't end up using that white chimney that I die cut for each of the cards in part one. Then this is my favorite part, is filling in those open areas with die cuts. So I had a raven that I added to one of the windows, and this spider web was my favorite element on all the cards because I was able to cut that cobweb up and glue it on different parts of the house. Also, of course, the bats, the spiders are all great little elements to fill in a card without adding too much, I guess. So I'm going to add 3 bats to this house. I did add 1 layer of white behind each of them. You can see that I already cut apart that spider web. I added some of it to the left side. I'm going to add a piece of it behind the pumpkin. And then I'm going to use every last inch of it. So I'll add whatever I have left at the very top of the card. So I was really able to stretch that one die cut and use it all over my card. So I wanted a Enter If You Dare sign. This is from a Pink and Main stamp set. All of the supplies that I'm using will be linked down below. But I felt like it needed some orange because I knew behind my windows I wanted to add bright orange. And there was no other orange element other than my pumpkin on the card. So I thought that this sign would be perfect. It would dress up the door a bit. So I stamped out the sign with VersaFine Onyx Black ink on orange cardstock. I'm going to fussy cut it out. And then I'm going to glue this sign on one side of the swinging door. I don't want to glue the doors shut, so make sure you're only gluing it on one side. In this case, I do end up closing the door completely. You're going to see that I'm going to stamp out my sentiment here, which is eat, drink, and be scary. I thought that was perfect for a Halloween party. This is a stamp set by LDRS. And yeah, so I wanted that to be peeking behind the doors of all of my cards. But for the light up one, the wires end up covering the sentiment. So I didn't like that, so I'm going to completely close off all the doors that I light up. But for the ones that don't light up, I made sure to glue that sign on the left side of the door so that both doors can swing open and reveal that sentiment. I did stamp it out directly onto my orange card base that I'm going to have backing my white one. And I did trim it a little bit so that it lined up better with the door. I did clear heat emboss it because VersaFine does take a while to dry and I didn't want it to smear. And then here I have my battery and my lights. I have 3-in-1 glue, my favorite glue for gluing heavy objects. So I'm trying to line it up with my pumpkin. I'll go ahead and glue my pumpkin, and everything lines up perfectly. So I actually prefer using Pear Blossom Press Lights on pop-up cards because I don't have to bother with the foam tape. It's already popped up for me. So this is a lot easier than you might think it is. So I'm going to first start by attaching my connector pieces. You don't have to attach them yet unless you want to. This was my first attempt at making this card light up, but for the other two, I don't think I add the connectors first. But I want to make sure that my lights are glued to this orange panel. If I glue them directly behind the windows, the light isn't going to expand as much because it'll be concentrated in one spot. So by gluing them onto this orange panel, it's creating some distance so that light can expand. I feel like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. But I just thought that it looked better. So I'm going to close off each side of my connectors, attaching the front panel to the back. I am using art glitter glue here. I should have probably used 3-in-1 on the side of the battery, but it ended up working out fine. I have some Scotch tape. I wanted clear tape just in case people were looking inside. It would be a clear tape as opposed to like a washi. So then all I have to do is line up my light bulbs behind my windows and stick those wires down with the Scotch tape. Now it's pretty messy inside, but I didn't really care. I thought that it was cool, and it might be kind of interesting for people to see how it lights up. Here's where I realized that the wires are completely covering my sentiment, so I went ahead and closed the door by gluing the right side of my sign to the right door. And now I'm working on the back side of my card. So I glued another roof to the top panel. I'm going around the edges of my party text with stormy sky. I wanted this to blend in with the background more. I felt like it was a really stark white. So I like the way that that turned out. I'm going to go ahead and glue that right to the center. And then I'm going to add a gray doorstep to the bottom, a black fence, and another pumpkin. I do want to read off the text that I printed, but please do not show up to my party. I don't have enough food for everyone. As much as I would love to have my crafty friends at my party, I only am accommodating for 12 people. So yeah, but the text I have, I found it online. It's really cute. It says, "Beware, it's a ghostly affair. Attend if you dare." Then I had the date and time, the address, the RSVP, and then at the end or the bottom, it says, "Those not in costume will suffer an unspeakable fate." I thought that was very cute. So now that this panel is done, I can go ahead and glue it to my white card base. Again, you don't need that white in between the orange and the blue, but this was the first card I made. So that pretty much completes the first card design. Here I'm showing you how it lights up when you press the pumpkin. So cool. I actually really like that the orange paper mixes with the lights, so it's like a bright orange light, which is different from the other ones that I'm going to show you. Here's the Eat, Drink, and Be Scary when you open the door and the lights lit up in the darkness. Very cool card. Now we are on to the second card design, inspired by Estelle. I messed up her name in the first video. Her username is still A2Scrap, and I will have her Instagram linked down below. Please go check her out. She's super talented, and she used this year's Tim Holtz Halloween dies along with the Fairy House add-on and the house die for her card. So I was inspired by the dies she used as well as the colors she went with, which were black, gray, and brown. So I'm starting this card off the same way I did with the first one, where I go around the edges of my base panels. So I have 2 gray house panels. I went around each one with black Distress Oxide ink, and here I have my cobblestone stencil that I just die cut from 110-pound white cardstock, and I'm going through this stencil with both black soot Distress Oxide and regular ink. I know some people say to never mix the two. One's a dye ink, one's a pigment hybrid ink. So I don't think it's recommended. I would not suggest doing it, but because it's black, I didn't think it was a huge deal. There wasn't much contamination going on. And I love that the Distress ink is darker than the oxide. So you can see some of the stones are darker and some are lighter. The cobblestone stencil definitely worked out the best because the openings were larger. There wasn't any finicky bits like the wood grain had, so I think out of all the stencils, this one worked out the best and also came out the coolest. I went around my purple door with the black soot ink and also my chimneys. Here I have my roofs, which I die cut from the Fairy House add-on, and if it wasn't for Estelle, I would have never thought to use these roofs for a spooky Halloween card because I drew them as a flower. Like it's meant to be a flower roof. So I am using it today as like a dead flower roof, dead leaves or whatever. And I am adding some walnut stain distress ink to the bottom of the roofs as well as the brown doorsteps. I'm mixing between distress ink and oxide because I did not have a dark brown oxide ink. So I'm just using what I have. I am laying out my card to figure out where I need to cut my door and my windows from my card base so that you can see through the inside. Here's where I realized that I forgot to ink up the top of my roof. This is a separate piece in the die set that you can cut from a different color if you want, but I decided to keep it all brown. So here are my windows. I thought about making the squares into diamonds, but eventually I just go with squares. And then I have a circular window for the top. For the other cards I made with this design, I did not go with the circle window. I added it to this one just because I knew I had 3 lights, so I had to have 3 windows. But for the other ones, I just went with the square windows because I felt like it looked a little less cluttered, but it's up to you. I like the way that both of them turned out. You might also notice that I did not ink blend the cobblestone all the way up to the roof line, and that's because this brown roof is going to cover pretty much that entire triangular part of the base. And what's cool about this die is you can fluff up the cut lines to add dimension. So I think this ended up looking like brown leaves. I really like the dimension that added. Here I cut part of the swirl off. I don't really know why. I just decided to do that. Then I will go ahead and glue my windows on top of the cutouts, and I'm only adding glue to the edges where it's going to overlap the base. So the cutouts are slightly smaller so that you have room to glue your windows to the base. Here I have my purple doors. Again, I die cut them twice, so I'm gluing both back to back. I didn't bother to ink blend the second purple. And then again, I'm going to attach this door by only gluing the edges of the door frame around the opening of my door cutout. Going to add my brown doorstep at the bottom, and then my lawn fawn spooky fence. Making sure that that door can still open. I don't want to glue it shut with that gate. And now it's time for the fun part. I have my ghosties here. I am layering 2 white die cuts for them to make them nice and dimensional. I mentioned in part 1 that all the dies I'm using today are a mixture of Scrappy Tails and Tim Holtz Halloween dies. And if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I encourage you guys to do that because I share tips on mass producing, and I also share and show how I had die cut all of these little pieces for each of my 12 cards. So I think it's a very helpful video. It's not as entertaining as this one might be, but if you're someone that wants to mass produce and find an effective way of doing that, I think part 1 would be really helpful for you guys. And I know with Christmas cards, a lot of you guys like to mass produce them, so I highly encourage you guys to check that out. I am adding black behind their faces to help them stand out more. So I added 1 ghost coming out behind the door, and 1 I'm going to have coming out of the window. I love the size of these ghosts. They're perfect. The door in the Fairy House add-on has a little window that I'm going to add. I just backed it with some yellow cardstock. The die also has the hinges of the door. I am gluing them to the right of the score line just so that they don't bend. I also went ahead and added the doorknob. And then I have my spooky tree. I added a white die cut behind it to help it pop out more. And I will glue that to the bottom left. And this is just all the little details that make me so happy. And that cobblestone is so cool. I love that about this card the most. It looks pretty busy, but everything just works so nicely together. I added a spider web to the top of my roof along with a spider. I added another one to the bottom right, and that's going to pretty much finish off the front panel of the house. I'm just going to add my chimney. I should have wedged the smoke in between, but I forgot here. So I had to peel it open and tuck that in. I'm also adding a brown strip to the top of the chimney for some more detail. And here's where I tuck that smoke in between the 2 chimneys. And these cards do fold completely flat and fit inside a number 10 slimline business envelope. I did trim it down. I used the grid on my mat to make sure that it wasn't taller than 9 inches. And then here I have my party info. This time I cut up every little piece because I wanted to glue them kind of wonky on the back of my card. I did go around each of the edges with the black soot distress oxide ink just so that it would blend in better. I'm adding my roof. And I did cut off that swirl because it would have been the opposite on the back side, and I didn't want there to be 2 swirls, if that makes sense. I'm going to add my brown doorstep and another lawn fawn fence at the bottom. And then I'll go ahead and glue my cat together. So I have 2 white layers and 1 black. And I'm also going to give her some yellow eyes just with a scrap of yellow cardstock. And as I'm editing this video, I'm realizing that these are the only Halloween cards I made this year. In years past, when I sold handmade cards, I made almost as many Halloween cards as I did Christmas, just because Halloween parties were a huge thing on Etsy, especially custom invites. So it's kind of crazy that these are the only 12 cards I made, but I must say I love them a lot and I really enjoyed this project. I will have a Halloween release next year. I tried to have one this year, but I kind of got swept up with Christmas and I wanted that to be perfect. So time honestly just got the best of me. I am in my first year of business, so I'm still learning. And I hope next year I will bring out an epic Halloween collection and fall release for you guys. I definitely want to do a Halloween party theme because there's not that many stamps and dies that relate to Halloween parties other than that one stamp, the Eat, Drink, and Be Scary sentiment, which came on a large 6x8 stamp with other images. So it wasn't even a party focused stamp. It just kind of happened to be a sentiment on there. So I would love to do that. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I know not everyone has Halloween parties, so I'd obviously also include general Halloween images, but I definitely want to have a party theme going on for next year. So I did add vellum behind my windows. I added a purple panel behind my back panel, which is what's going to be peeking through the windows. I am adding my battery to the exact same spot behind my front panel. I did add my push here button. I matted it with some yellow just to help it stand out more. It's a pretty small sentiment, so I think that helped make it stand out. Then I'm just doing the exact same thing where I glue my light bulbs to the purple panel. You're going to see that I constantly readjust the lights so that it is perfectly in the center of each window. And if you have not used these lights by Pear Blossom Press, I encourage you guys to try just one light up card because they're much easier than they used to be. There's no wire tape. And if you're making a pop-up card, there's not even any foam tape you need to use. So I would argue that creating light up cards are easier in pop-up designs than they are on regular flat cards. They're cool on either, but I love using them on pop-up cards. It just has that double wow factor to the cards. So yeah, so on this design you can see I did not add my connectors first. I added them after gluing down all the lights or taping down the lights. But now I'm going to add my connectors to attach the front and back panels. I'm using art glitter glue for this. Hindsight 2020, should have used double-sided tape, but glue is just so convenient and so quick. So it ended up working out fine. So here I'm showing you the other cards I made. Here I decided to close the door again, but these are the ones with the Eat, Drink, and Be Scary inside. I added acetate behind those windows that obviously did not light up. And then here is the light up card. So cool. Here's a close-up, and then here's how the lights look with darker lighting. Very cool, my favorite design. And now we're on to card 3. Once again, I have my black soot distress oxide ink and 2 gray panels. I'm going around the edges with my ink to add some more dimension. And this time I'm going to use the slimline brick background. So I used every background that Scrappy Tales has brought out for the pop-up house. And obviously you can just glue the die cut on top. But I thought using them as a stencil would be something different, and I would only have to cut it out once. And I was able to use each stencil 4 times. The wood grain was a bit rough, I'll admit, but the brick and the cobblestone worked out really well. So again, I used both the oxide and the distress ink to blend the bricks, and I just love that look. The bricks look super worn and grungy. I think it turned out really cool. So this is the card with that spooky gate by Tim Holtz. I'm adding 2 white layers to each gate, and then on the top I'm adding the silver layer. So these invites were sent as a Halloween party, but it's also my husband's birthday party because he has a birthday very close to Halloween, and he said that his parents growing up always kind of did Halloween parties for him. He loves Halloween as much as I do. So it is also his birthday party, and out of all the invitations, he liked this design the best. So this one is completely black, gray, white, and silver. I did lay out everything onto my card so that I knew where to die cut my openings. These all come in the Christmas house add-on. And this triangle window isn't actually meant to be a window. It's supposed to be a beam for the German styled house for Christmas, but I'm going to use it as a window. So I'm using the triangle window die to cut the opening. So that one is going to be more of an inlay, while the others are going to be slightly raised because those will be glued directly on the card base, while the triangle is going to be glued onto the vellum. I hope that makes sense. So for the chimneys, instead of ink blending those, I use the leftover cutouts that I used to cut from the base, and I just glued them onto the chimney so that the brick would continue. And this was the last design I made. I kind of wish I did it with all of the chimneys, but you learn as you go. You get better with practice. So I only ended up doing that with the brick design. So here I have my door. This is a single opening door. I'm adding my doorknob and a skull. And as I was linking to the Tim Holtz dies, some of them are sold out, which is very unfortunate because they're some of my favorite Halloween dies. So the ones that are available, I think the gate you can still buy, and my favorite one you can still buy, but the one with the raven I think is sold out everywhere. I think it's a retired product now. So that's kind of a bummer, but I know that you can probably use stuff in your stash. You don't have to put a skull on your door. You can put a ghost or a jack-o'-lantern, really any image. I'm going to glue my gate to each side of my door. I'm going to have to trim it a little bit at the bottom. And in reality, I should have shifted these down even more because you can see that both are covering my windows up there. And I plan on adding some lanterns onto those windows. So for the other 3 cards, I did shift the gate down slightly. I'm going to add my roof. This comes in the German house Christmas house add-on. It's sort of curved inwards. Has a whimsical look to it. For my windows, I cut each of them, once from white and once from silver mirror. So here you can see I'm lifting up that gate so that I can tuck the windows in. And then in the center of each of those, I will have my little lanterns, which I think add a really cool spooky vibe. I'm also going to add the cobweb and some spiders. So let me know in the comment section which of the 3 is your favorite. Here I have my chimneys, gluing the smoke in between each. And then I have my cobweb that I already cut apart. I'll just glue them all around the design. And while I'm making Halloween cards in today's video, you can definitely make these into Christmas party invites. And I'm trying to convince my mom for her to throw a Christmas party. And I offered that if she does, I will make basically the same invites as the Halloween ones, just make them Christmas themed. Out of all the pop-ups that Scrappy Tales has brought out, this slimline birdhouse pop-up is definitely the most versatile because you can do Halloween houses, Christmas, bird houses, advent calendars. We have a lot of different add-ons attached to this die set, so you can get a lot of looks out of it, which I love. And I am going to be making some advent calendars for Thanksgiving for my family. I thought that would be a nice little table setting. I actually never host Thanksgiving. I am actually a terrible cook, so whenever I do go to Thanksgiving dinner to my family and my in-laws, I thought it would be nice to have some kind of table settings for them. Alright, so I added vellum behind my windows. I have my black panel that I'm going to add behind my other brick base. And then I will go ahead and decorate the back. I have my second roof that I'm adding. I wanted to add one spider to the gate here, and then I'll have 2 spiders I can add to the back of this card. I have a strip of black that I'm adding. You can use the doorstep that's included, but for some reason I forgot to die cut that, so I just added a strip to the bottom. Okay, I guess I have 3 spiders. I ended up with an extra one, I think, so I added it to this card. For the text on this, I did not do any ink blending. I actually liked the stark white, and I'll admit I was also kind of done at this point with the ink blending. So yeah, I went ahead and glued all of that down. I have my push here button. Then I'm going to glue to the bottom part of the gate. And then I have my third and final battery and light by Pear Blossom Press. All right. And at this point, I had pretty much mastered how to glue these lights down. And make sure that the yellow part is sticking up. That's obviously where the bulb is. And I have in the past glued that face down, and I was confused on why it wasn't lighting up as much as the other 2 light bulbs were. All right, so now that those are all taped down, I will add my connector pieces. And then that will finish off my haunted house pop-up, light-up, slimline Halloween party invitations. These were so fun to create. They were definitely a labor of love. So if you haven't yet already, please like this video so that it is seen to other people, and also subscribe to my channel. We're trying to hit 5,000 followers, and then my husband will do a voiceover, which I guarantee you will be hilarious. And let me know if you guys want to see a Christmas card version of these. I would love to create 3 holiday slimline pop-up houses. And I also hope you have a wonderful Halloween. Let me know what you're going to dress up as. I'm going to be 2 characters. Sabrina Spellman from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, of course. Pretty much growing up, half my Halloweens I dressed up as a witch because that was my favorite TV show growing up. I love that she had my name. And then I'm also going to be Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad, and my husband's going to be Walter. So we're going to be a matching duo. I will have pictures over on my Instagram if you guys are curious to see the costumes and the party. So I would love to know if you guys are celebrating Halloween this year. Let me know what you're dressing up as or what your kids are dressing up as. I'm always curious to know. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!